This is Lessons in the Challenges of Leadership, the series that enables managers to achieve the remarkable. Podcast, video, short reads, brought to you by Being Learning. Conceived, developed and presented by Siebert Neathling.
Do you belong to a group that has a stereotype associated with it? Are you German, or Irish, or Italian, or French, or a Southerner, or from the Midwest? Are you a banker, or a stockbroker, or a nurse, or a plumber, or are you a lawyer? Are you a young woman in a leadership position, or a baby boomer, or a millennial? Are you a public servant? We all belong to groups that we know has a stereotype associated with it. And we often feel that we are not typical of the groups we belong to. There's even a concept called stereotype threat, the stress associated with realizing that there's a stereotype associated with your group. When we use the word culture in a general sense, it is rarely much more than such a stereotype, even though there might anecdotally and even statistically be some substance to the stereotype. And this is why I shied away from the concept of culture in organizations for much of my career. It is also just so nebulous. What is it really? Even today we hear popular but pretty inane definitions like, it's how we do things around here, and other platitudes. The Swedish academic Mats Elvesen states that definitions use culture in a way which comprises everything and thus nothing. What also gives culture a bad name is the extent to which the professed culture of organizations deviates from reality. Take this statement, for example. We treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. We do not tolerate abusive or disrespectful treatment. Ruthlessness, callousness, and arrogance don't belong here. And we work with customers and prospects openly, honestly, and sincerely. When we say we will do something, we will do it. When we say we cannot or will not do something, then we won't do it. These are sentences from the values document of Enron. Now, if memories of Enron are fading, a reminder. Enron is the energy company that colluded with their accounting firm to keep huge debts off their balance sheets, deceiving investors in what is arguably the most serious case of corruption in corporate history. Their collapse caused thousands of employees and investors to lose their retirement funds and jobs. $74 billion in shareholder value was lost. It was only when I formally studied culture as a mandatory module in a master's program that I started coming to terms with the idea. It also confirmed that it is one of the most overused and much abused concepts in leadership literature. For some years now, there has been this prominent idea that culture is more important than strategy. Peter Drucker reportedly said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And this has become an often quoted truism in management and consulting environments. Well, apparently Drucker never actually said that. And I'm glad to hear it, because when it comes to two such fundamentally important concepts, no one should be eating anyone else for breakfast. But seriously, I think we too often simplify the world into binary options, usually reduced to zero-sum outcomes where more of one means less of the other. But so much in life is not a zero-sum game. Which of my two sons do I love most, James or Alex? It is a ridiculous question, because more of one does not mean less of the other. I like to refer to the need for simultaneity, even though this is already a term used in physics with its own specific meaning. All I mean by simultaneity is that we have to strive to have the two apparent opposites in play at the same time, simultaneously. Build a phenomenal culture and be strategic. Apply great strategy to get the best out of that culture and be strategic about how you build it and about the kind of culture that you want to build. Now, we all have experienced examples where the value statements of organizations and their culture statements deviate from reality. Hypocrisy is rife when it comes to values and culture descriptors. So how do we build a genuinely good culture? And of course, what is culture really? Now, my favorite definition is that culture is to a group what personality is to an individual. If you describe a person, you would find words to describe their usual behavior and the aspects that make them who they are. We'd know that personality is not always consistent. Sometimes the person might be energetic and other times lazy, sometimes happy and sometimes a bit grumpy. But we'll find words that generally describe the person, with probably a few exceptions thrown in as well. A person's personality is formed by genetics, environment, experiences, context, and also deliberate and intentional initiatives and interventions. Organizations are the same. We can generally describe an organization's culture, its positive attributes, and what makes it unique. But we know that it is not entirely consistent. Some part of the organization might be a bit different from others, and not every individual will perfectly embody the organization. I like the idea of personality because if we delve deeper, it is more than just what someone does or how they behave. It is about their history, how their personality has been shaped by their own childhood experiences and their relationships, and it is also about values, the deep-rooted principles that inform their behaviors. Now, the next question is, can we influence culture? Leaders often make grand statements about how they will change culture in an organization. Following my academic research in this field and experience of so many versions of organizational culture in my work, I've developed this important way of looking at culture. A detailed literature review revealed that when people refer to culture, they are not always talking about the same thing. There are 4 different groups of ideas. At the deepest level, culture is foundational or anthropological. It is possible to describe Scandinavian culture as opposed to British culture, for example. A firm of accountants is likely to have a different culture from a small construction business. The culture of an organization is to some extent influenced by the kinds of people attracted to that type of organization. Their personalities, ethnicities, levels of education, types of intellect. This is admittedly the domain of some cultural stereotypes. But if I think back on the many organizations in which I've led, from a jazz radio station to a large brewing company to a university faculty to a consulting firm and a creative agency, I know that the culture of each was influenced to a large extent by the kinds of people attracted to those organizations. In later episodes, I will refer to the work of the Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede to elaborate on this. The next level of culture is about cultural values. Let's take one of the groups I've mentioned, accountants. In our world, there are ethical accountants and there are accountants whose moral compass is less reliable. The culture in a firm where leaders hold themselves to high ethical standards and where honesty is a core value is going to be different from the culture in a firm where rules are routinely bent and where people are rewarded for what they can get away with, regardless of honesty. We know both kinds of firms exist. In any organization, the dominant value system will influence culture. This relates to the genuine beliefs that stem from the philosophies and ideologies of the people in an organization, perhaps the founders or influential leaders. The next level is symbolic culture, incorporating all the representations of culture that are readily established, produced, cultivated, and promoted by the organization. This includes tangible symbols like premises, publications, mission statements, press releases, logos, slogans, brands. It also includes some intangible symbols such as rituals and myths, legends, stories, language. When I walk into the London offices of AEG, who own and operate large entertainment venues such as the O2 Arena, I immediately get a sense of its culture from the large photographs of concerts on the wall, from the way the receptionist greets you, from the general buzz in the office, from the casual way that people dress. On the other hand, the offices of QBE Insurance down the road in the City of London are more formal, with fittings, furniture, and artwork appropriate to a global insurance house. That decor is very similar to what you see in their head office in Sydney. When you walk into my offices, the black and white aesthetic and the heritage building, together with a library-like working space but playful back office, reflects the marriage of our strategy, learning, and creative businesses. Finally, The next level of organisational culture is cultural behaviour patterns. Here we refer to habitual behaviours of people in an organisation. Good manifestations of this are whether people greet one another when they get to work. Are people on time for meetings? How courteous are they towards one another? Is there robust debate? Do people shout at one another? Do colleagues have lunch together? How are clients spoken about? Now, obviously, these 4 levels of culture overlap and are related. In the next episode, we'll show why it is important to distinguish between the 4 and how fundamentally different our leadership response should be at the different levels.